Hello, guys. Once again, this is Doc A, and for today, we're going to have a discussion about crisis and crisis intervention. So, since we're discussing crisis and crisis intervention, we're also going to have a discussion in terms of grief and losses, because most likely, whenever we lost someone or something that is dear to us, we do grieve, and most of us would be able to experience crisis and would be needing crisis intervention later on. Okay, so when we talk about crisis, I think crisis is a critical moment in a person's life when the usual coping mechanism are overwhelming, and it could lead to emotional, psychological, and sometimes even physical imbalances. So in nursing practice, especially in mental health and emergency care, encountering individuals in crisis is common, and it requires prompt, skilled, and compassionate intervention. So, crisis intervention focuses on helping individuals regain their stability, reduce their distress that they are experiencing, and restore their ability to function effectively. And as a future nurses, understanding the nature of crisis and applying appropriate therapeutic responses are essential in for us to be able to provide safe, holistic, and patient-centered care. So when we deal with crisis, we could say that crisis is the turning point in an individual's life that produces an overwhelming emotional response. So we could say that crises are situations that might occur when an individual's habitual coping ability becomes ineffective. And for us to meet the demands of the situation, crisis will arise. Okay, so I do believe that um, in some point of our life, maybe we were able to experience crisis. Okay, just for example, do you think the Philippines is experiencing crisis now? It's 2026. With what is happening in the Middle East, are we experiencing crisis? So let's see if the situation becomes too overwhelming for us and it produces emotional burden to us. So probably we are experiencing crisis. Okay. So here on this slide, we could see the different stages of crisis. Okay. So we have four phases or four stages of crisis as we could see. So for stage one or phase one, you are exposed to a stressful situation and it causes us to experience anxiety. And because of that, we are going to try to cope in a customary manner. So, meaning to say, based on our past experiences, what we have done to be able to cope with those stressful situations, we're going to do that. And if we are on that particular situation, basically it means that we are experiencing the first phase or the first stage. On phase two, okay, your anxiety builds when your past method coping don't relieve the stress that we are experiencing. Meaning to say, anxiety increases even though we are using the past methods, the past coping mechanisms that we have done before. And it seems that those coping mechanisms that we are trying to use are still ineffective, so that is our phase two. For phase three, so you try every new ideas and coping strategy that you can think of. So meaning to say that the person makes all possible efforts to deal with the stressor. So they try to attempt different ways, different methods of coping so that they could um leave the situation that they could be able to surpass the situation or the stressor that they are experiencing. So if you are already trying new strategies, trying new things for you to survive on that situation, that is phase three. And for the phase four, so every idea fails. Okay, so it means that all of the coping mechanisms that you have, you already attempted those things, and all of those ideas fail. So the person experiences this equilibrium at this moment, okay, and it will result to significant distress, and that is our phase four. Okay, so again, if there is a stressful situation and you're using your past experiences, so that is phase one. For phase two, your anxiety increases because your past methods, your past coping mechanisms didn't work. For phase three, you are trying new ideas, new coping mechanisms. And for phase four, all of the ideas, all of the coping mechanisms fail. And it brought you to this equilibrium, to an imbalance or distress. And you are unable to cope with that situation. That is stage four. Okay? So those are the stages of crisis. On the other hand, when we talk about crisis, so crisis occur in response to a variety of life situation and events and fall into three categories. So we have three categories of crisis. First one is the maturational crisis. So sometimes maturational crisis is also known as developmental crisis. Okay, so it is also known as developmental crisis. So these are the expected and predictable events in the normal course of life. Okay, for instance, you are 18 years old and you're going to college, so it is a developmental crisis, okay? Especially if you are living with your family in far away area, then you're going to the urban area, to the cities to have your education there. So leaving your home, leaving your comfort zone could be a crisis, and it is maturational crisis or developmental crisis. So another example of maturational or developmental crisis is um, couples, okay, married couples, and they are going to have their first baby. So that is expected. That is something that is predictable. However, it could lead to crisis. Okay, so another type of crisis that we have is the situational crisis. Okay. So for situational crisis, these are unanticipated or these are sudden events that threatens the individual's integrity. So meaning to say, since it is situational, so meaning to say it is not everyone will be able to experience this. So sometimes situational crises are also known as accidental crisis. Okay? So not everyone will be going to undergo the same experience. So for example, death of a loved one. So no one knows when we are going to experience that. Okay? Or loss of a job. So not everyone is losing job, okay, or having physical disability. So it is individualized. Not all of us would be able to experience that. So those are examples of accidental or situational crisis. Okay. And lastly, we have the third one. These are the adventitious crisis, or sometimes it is also called as the social crisis. Okay, so for our social crisis, it means that a lot of people would be able to experience that. Um, Example of this is war. Okay, So every time there are terrorist attacks, there are war happening. So a lot of people are being affected by it. Okay. Another example are natural disasters like earthquake, flooding, volcanic eruption. Okay. So it is not only one or two or something that is expected to happen, but a lot of us might be affected by those situations. So we call that as adventitious or social crisis. So are we clear? Do you have any questions? If there are questions that you want to raise, do not hesitate to message on our comment box, and I will try to answer your questions, your queries, as much as I can. Okay? So thank you. So moving forward, there are several influencing factors in crisis experience. This is why sometimes there is a same situation, a same scenario, same event. However, not all people would be able to experience crisis because of these factors. One, the individual's perception of the event. How does the person perceive the situation? Second, the availability of emotional support. Are there other persons for them to help them, okay, to guide them, to be with them? And lastly, the availability of adequate coping mechanisms. So these factors affects the experience of having a crisis or not. So if you have a very positive outlook, you have good emotional support, and you have a lot of coping mechanisms at hand, so most likely there is a lesser possibility for one person to experience crisis. Okay? So what are the different characteristics of a crisis state? How could we say that a person is in crisis? First, we need to remember that crisis is highly individualized. It is quite subjective. It is only the person who can tell whether they are on crisis or not. Second, crisis is self-limiting. It means that crisis does not last indefinitely. It will not last for a lifetime. But usually, crisis exists only for about 4 to 6 weeks. Next, crisis affects the person's support system. So obviously, if a person is in crisis, it is not only them who are affected by the crisis. Okay, the people around them, people that loves them are also affected by it. And lastly, a person in crisis becomes passive and submissive. So they just go with the flow. Whatever other people tell them, they just follow it because they cannot think clearly. They are just looking for possible answers to the situation, and they are very much willing to grab whatever solution are there have for them to have. Okay, so what can we do if a person is in crisis? They need to have crisis intervention. So when we talk about crisis intervention, it is our way of entering into their life situation. Um, our client could be an individual, they could be a whole family, a whole group, or even the entire community. And what we need to do is to help them mobilize their resources. It is important for us to let them see their resources and use them well. Okay? And by using those resources, we are expecting to be able to decrease the effect of crisis, including stress. So always remember that persons experiencing crisis are usually the stressed, and they are likely to seek help for their distress. They are ready to learn, and they even eager to try new coping skills as a way for them to relieve their stresses. So this is the ideal time for intervention that is likely to be successful. Okay? Always remember that for crisis intervention, it includes a variety of techniques. that are based on our assessment, that are based on the assessment that we made with our client. Again, our client could be an individual, it could be the whole family, the whole group, or the entire community. And the main goal of crisis intervention is to help them or to enable them to attain the optimum level of functioning. Okay? So there are two types of crisis intervention. Okay, we have the directive intervention and the supportive intervention. Okay, so for the directive intervention, they are designed to assess the person's health status and promote problem solving. So examples are offering the person new information, giving them new knowledge, or raising the person's self-awareness by providing feedback about their behavior. It also includes directing the person's behavior by offering suggestions or possible course of action. So those are directive interventions. Again, when we talk about directive intervention, it is designed for us to assess the person's health status and help them promote problem solving skills. On the other hand, we have the supportive intervention. So for supportive intervention, it aims at dealing with the person's needs of empathetic understanding. So it might include encouraging the person to identify and discuss their feelings. It also includes serving as a sounding board for the person, or be the affirming person that they have their own worth. So any techniques or strategy that we could use during crisis intervention aims to balance the different situations. I mean, in dealing with crisis, we need also to use the different types of intervention, may it be directive or supportive intervention, and just look which one is more effective on that specific case. Okay? Always remember that as nurses, we need to play an active role. We have the active role because our patients, those people who are in crisis, are in a passive and submissive mode. So we need to be active, we need to be directive, yet we need to be supportive. Okay? So it means that we need to let them or encourage them verbalize their feelings and guide them to identify problems and their strengths. Okay? So basically, that is what crisis and crisis intervention is. Okay? So next is about grief and loss. So we all know that when we lose something that is very important, we might be grieving after. Okay? So experiences of loss are normal and it is essential in human life. Meaning to say that we need to let go, we need to relinquish or move on in our everyday life, in our everyday experiences. Okay, those things are unavoidable. Okay, so as person, we need to experience those things. We need to move through those stages for us to grow and to develop. So people frequently say goodbye to places. Um, we say goodbye to people and to even to development. Okay, so sometimes we we say we bid our buys with our dreams with some familiar objects. So example of necessary losses accompanying growth could be abandoning a favorite blanket or your toy, or living your grade one teacher. Okay, giving up the adolescent hope of becoming a famous rock star, So those are some of losses that we might experience. So always remember that loss allows a person to change, to develop, and to fulfill innate human potential. So it may be planned, it could be expected, or it could be saddened. Although it can be difficult, always remember that loss is sometimes beneficial. Okay, so other times it could be devastating and debilitating. However, there are also times wherein losses could be on our own benefit. Okay, so here are some of the um, terms that we need to remember. Okay, so the first one is grief. Grief refers to the subjective emotion and affect that are normal response to experience of loss. So every time we lost something, we feel something heavy, so we call it as grief. Okay, so grieving is also known as bereavement. So it refers to the process by which a person experiences the grief. So the process of grief is grieving. What we feel when we lost something is grief. Okay? I'm hoping that that is understandable, the difference between grief and grieving. So when we talk about grieving, it involves not only the content, it involves not only what a person thinks, says, and feel, but it also includes the process, how the person thinks, how the person say it, and how they feel it. Okay? So all people grieve when they experience life changes and when they experience losses. So often, grieving is one of the most difficult and challenging process of human existence. So really, it is comfortable or pleasant, but most of the time it is painful. Okay, so other terms that we need to remember, we have anticipatory grieving. So it is when a people facing an imminent loss in the near future. So meaning to say that you already anticipated that there could be a loss. Example, your grandparents are too old and sickly. Okay, so you are already anticipating since they are too old and sickly already that you might lose them in the near future. So we call it as anticipatory grieving. Okay. On the other hand, we have the disenfranchised grief. Okay, so for the disenfranchised grief, it is a grief over a loss that is not or cannot be acknowledged openly. Okay, so meaning to say, you cannot mourn publicly. Okay, you cannot be supported by the society about your grief. Example, you're the other woman, you're a third party, and your partner died. Okay, since your partner have his own family, so you cannot show that you are grieving publicly. Okay, so we call this as disenfranchised grief. Another thing, we have the complicated grief. So it is a response outside the norm. So meaning to say, when a person is void of emotion, grieves for a prolonged period of time, or has expansion of grief that seems disproportionate to the event. So those are examples of complicated grief. Okay. Sometimes other books are also telling that there are circumstances wherein we need to look at. Okay, so for instance, for disenfranchised grief, okay, um, being an illegitimate, okay, family. So most likely, what you are going to experience is the disenfranchised grief. The loss itself is not recognized, but the griever is not also recognized. but the loss is there. The loss involves social stigma. That's why it's disenfranchised. Okay, so that's an example of being an illegitimate family. So that's disenfranchised. And most likely, since you cannot publicly mourn, you cannot publicly grieve, so it could be a complicated grief because you cannot grieve on the society. So most likely, it will be on a more prolonged period of time. Instead of grieving for just only 6 months, 1 year, maybe it will take you more than that. And if that happens, so it's not only a disenfranchised grief, but it could be a complicated grief already. Okay? So mourning, when we talk about mourning, these are the outward expression of grief. What we what we could see is mourning. If they are crying, if they are shouting because of the pain that they are experiencing, because of the grief that they have, so we call it as mourning. Okay? So we have different types of losses. Okay, so one framework to examine the different types of losses is Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. So when human needs are taken away or not met for some reason, a person might experience loss. So example of losses related to specific human needs in how in um, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs are as follows. So, of course, we have the physiologic needs. So, this includes amputation, mastectomy, hysterectomy, loss of mobility, being disabled. So, those are physiologic loss. Okay. Next is our safety loss. So, safety loss includes loss of safe environment, maybe because of domestic violence, child abuse. A person's home should be a safe haven, right? With your trust with your family members. However, if the family and the home cannot protect you anymore, instead it gives you harm and violence. So we loses the safety environment that we have. Okay. So this might also include not only our home, but even public institutions like school, churches. So those are also associated with safety losses. So next, loss of sense of belongingness. The loss for a loved one affects the need to love and the feeling to being loved. Another example is loss that accompanies changes in relationship. Okay. What do I mean? Divorce, illness, death. So that's why you were able to have changes in the relationship. So as the meaning of relationship changes, remember this: a person may lose roles within the family, within the partnership, within the group. Okay? So, next is loss of self esteem. So, when we talk about loss of self esteem, any change in how a person is valued at work or in relationship or by him or herself can threaten self-esteem. So it may be an actual change or the person's perception of a change in value. So examples of this are broken relationship, okay, loss of job, retirement. So those are examples of possible losses of self-esteem. And lastly, we have the loss related to self-actualization. So here, these are internal and it could also be external crisis that blocks or inhibits striving toward fulfillment that might threaten your personal goal and your individual potential. So examples are a person who wanted to go to college but they cannot go to college. So they could experience loss related to self-actualization. Okay. Or a person who teach at a university but reaches a point in life when it becomes evident that those plans will never materialize anymore. So that could be loss related to self-actualization. Okay? So I'm hoping that everything is still clear and good. Again, once again, if you have questions, queries, you could be able to approach me or send it on the comment box, and I will try to answer your questions whenever I'm able to see those things. Okay, so let's have an example. Okay, and tell me which losses is that? FO, friendship over. So what is that? Okay, very good. Loss with a sense of belongingness. Okay, let's have another one. Um, difficulty of breathing. So what is that? Okay, very good. Physiologic loss. Okay, so you are all doing well. Okay, so let's move forward. So um, there are a lot of well-known theories in terms of grieving. Okay, and one of those is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages of grief. Okay, we have DABDA. Always remember DABDA. D, denial. A, anger. B, bargaining. D, depression. And A, acceptance. But aside from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's stages of grief, there are other theories of grieving that we're also going to discuss. We also have John Bowlby theory and George Engels theory. But first, before moving to Bowlby and Engels theory, so let's discuss first Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stage of grief. Okay, so she was able to establish this in in 1969. She was able to establish the stage of grief in 1969. Okay, and it became a basis for understanding how loss affects human life. So as she attended to clients with terminal illness, a process of dying became apparent to her. So through her observations and work with dying clients and their families, Kubler-Ross developed a model of 5 stages so that she could be able to explain what people experience as they grieve and mourn. So the first one is denial. So being in denial, it means that they are in shock. They are in disbelief regarding the loss. And usually the common the common words that we could hear when people are in denial is no, no, not me. Okay, no, that's not happening to me. So it's always no. Okay, because they are in denial. They cannot accept it yet. Okay. So the second stage, we have anger. So anger may be expressed towards God. It could be expressed towards relatives, family members, friends, or even healthcare provider. Okay. So usually they are angry at other people. Okay. And most of the time they are also asking why. For example, they are angry with God, so they are cursing God, and they are asking God why these things are happening to me. Why me? Okay? So that is anger. So the next on the line, our third stage is bargaining. So for bargaining, it occurs when the person asks God or faith for more time to delay the inevitable loss. Okay? So they try to haggle. They try to say, if only I could bring back time, I would do this and that. Okay? If only you're going to give me another chance, I will be a better person. So that is bargaining. Okay? So next we have depression. For depression, it is a result when the awareness of loss becomes acute. Meaning to say, you already know that the loss is there. Okay, and you just try to become silent. Okay, you don't want to talk much because you just feel too heavy to talk and to tell what you are feeling. Okay, but after some time there will be acceptance. Okay, for acceptance it occurs when the person shows evidence of coming to terms with death and telling, yes, it happened to me, yes, it is me who was able to experience that. Okay, so Kubler-Ross stage of grief um, become a prototype for most of the care providers as we try to look for the ways to understand and to help and assist our clients in the grieving process. Okay, so again, when we talk about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stage of grief, so we have DABDA, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. For denial, it's always no, 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 no. It's not happening to me. Anger, why me? Why it is happening to me? Okay? Bargaining, if only we could bring back time. If only you could give me another chance. So it's if only. Depression, it's more on silence. Okay? And acceptance, you could hear, yes, I'm ready to face the future. Yes, it is me. Yes, it happened to me. Okay? So I'm hoping that you were able to understand the stage of grief according to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Okay? So the next one is the work of Bowlby. So these are the phases of grieving according to John Bowlby. So John Bowlby is a British psychoanalyst who proposed a theory that human instinctively attain and retain affectional bond with significant others through attachment behavior. And this attachment behavior are crucial to the development of a sense of security and survival. So he tried to describe the grieving process as four phases. Okay. So the first one is the numbness and shock. So for numbness and shock, they are already um, experiencing numbness. However, they are still denying the loss. So here we could see a person fails to accept their loss or losses, the touch with reality. So it's almost the same as denial, right? So next, we have yearning and searching. So the second phase of the grief process, according to Bowlby, is that the person are emotionally yearning. When we talk about yearning, they are longing. Longing for what? Longing for the lost loved one. And they are trying to have a protest. Okay? They are protesting the permanence of the loss. So here we could see a person feels so empty and is often thinking about the loss, reliving memories, and looking for reminders. Okay? So for our third phase, we have the disorganization and despair. So obviously, people or individual are experiencing cognitive disorganization. They could experience emotional despair with difficulty functioning in their everyday world. So here we could see an individual experiences feelings of anger, feelings of hopelessness, which may even result into depression later on. However, as a time goes by, and if they have good support system and they have good coping mechanism, they could reach recovery and reorganization. So reorganizing and reintegrating the sense of self to pull life back together. So here we could see a person regains hope, and is ready to face their daily life. Okay? So last on our list is the work of George Engel in 1964, and these are the 5 stages of grieving. Okay? So the first stage is shock and disbelief. So for shock and disbelief, so this is the initial reaction to a loss. So they are stunned, they feel numb, um, and usually this numb feeling is accompanied by refusal to acknowledge the reality of the loss in attempt to protect the self against overwhelming stress. Okay, so basically they are on searching behavior. Okay. Next, second stage is the developing awareness. So developing awareness, here an individual begins to acknowledge the loss. So they may be crying, they could be feeling helpless, frustrated, despair, and anger or angry. However, that can be directed to others or even to themselves, including God or even the deceased person. Okay, they could doing that, they could be angry at them. Okay, so if we were able to see that, so they already develop awareness. So the third stage is restitution. For restitution, they are started to participate in rituals associated to death, like funeral, going to the wake, joining family gatherings, or even the religious ceremonies that help the individual accept the reality of loss and begin the recovery process. Okay, so next we have the fourth stage is the resolution of loss. So here the individual is preoccupied with the loss. So the lost person or object is idealized. However, the mourner may even imitate the person that they lost. Okay? So, for example, if it is the father who died, so the mourner will be the father-like figure of the family. However, eventually, the preoccupation of loss will decrease, and usually it decreases in a year or perhaps more than a year. Okay? Then, when it started to decrease, they are ready for the fifth stage, which is the recovery. So for the recovery, so obviously the previous preoccupation and obsession ends, and the individual is able to go with life in a way that it encompasses the loss. Meaning to say, when they reach recovery, they already normalizes their life. Okay? So what do we need to do for persons who are grieving, who experience loss? Okay? So first, the most common nursing diagnosis for them is the ineffective individual coping. And what can we do with them? So just bear. Okay, bear. So what are we going to bear? First, be physically present. Okay, make sure that they would feel that they have their support system. And another thing, since you're a support system, make sure that you are non-judgmental, okay, non-biased. So let them feel that you are there willing to listen, okay? You are there not to judge them for whatever they have done or what they are doing right now. Next, letter E, encourage verbalization of feelings, because we all know that when a person was able to verbalize their feelings, it make them feel better. Okay? It lessen the burden that they are experiencing, that they are feeling. Okay? Next, allow them to cry. Yeah, because crying is a way for us to grieve, to um, to release the emotions that we have. Okay. And lastly, we also need to recognize our own thoughts. So check about how we act, how we feel about death and dying. Okay. So with that, always remember, if you are dealing with patients who are grieving, bear them. So be present, encourage them to verbalize their feeling, allow them to cry. And at the end of the day, we always need to recognize our own thoughts in terms of death and dying. So, do you have any further questions? Are there other things that you want to ask to clarify? Okay, if none, so thank you very much for listening and hoping that you have learned something from today's discussion. So with that, I would like to thank all of you for staying with me. And once again, this is Doc A, and always willing to listen and to share what I know for all of you. Okay, so thank you and see you next time.